Hey, what's up, people? Today we're going to be watching the Zohran Mamdani interview on the New Yorker. Um, I'm getting more into politics. I do think this guy is probably a clown, and this guy. I do think he's real, and it's obvious like what he wants to implement, but I don't think it'll be good. I do think he's a communist. See what he has to say. Um, yeah, let's get into it.
Specifics on policy that I want to get into and politics, and we have plenty of time for that. But it has to cross your mind. I'm 33 years old. I'm running 20 points ahead. The guy that's right behind me has the likability factor of a traffic jam. It's very likely that you're going to be the next mayor of the city with a $115 billion budget, a president that calls.
Without a doubt, he's gonna be. And for me, it's kind of sad. But the one thing that makes him somebody that you kind of like for a split second is him saying that he's gonna stay in New York when all these other guys are going straight to Israel for some reason. It's just insane that that's our politics, but it is what it is.
To a communist half the time, and he's threatening the city in many different ways. When you go home at night and you're thinking about this emotionally on that level, and people are questioning your experience as well, naturally, simply on the basis of age, how do you feel about all this? Do you have any doubt when you're staring at this?
He's saying to himself, I am a communist. We're going to ruin New York. There will be bums in the government-run supermarket that are going to be fucking on the produce. It's going to be disgusting. People are going to get sick.
Ceiling at 3 o'clock in the morning, as you must do. No?
I have to be honest with you. I don't have trouble sleeping.
At all.
I don't.
Because you're walking across the city after that.
Because I'm quite tired when I get to bed.
But doubt never enters your mind. A lack of what if I let them down never enters your mind.
The weight of that hope is one that I do wrestle with, and the responsibility of living up to it. But doubt, I wouldn't say.
You did a very interesting video early on. You've done many videos, but one of the most interesting is you went around the city and asked people why they may have voted for Trump. And you got a range of answers. And then you talked to them further, and some of them resolved the conversation by saying, I'll vote for you. What's your overall impression of why so many New Yorkers voted for Trump? And why would they abandon them, in a sense, ideologically, and vote for a guy from the DSA?
You know, I specifically went to two of the neighborhoods that had the largest swings towards Trump. Some of the largest swings were taking place in the hearts of immigrant New York. And I went to Fordham Road in the Bronx, I went to Hillside Avenue in Queens. And I wanted to ask New Yorkers a question and to listen to them. And when you ask a New Yorker an open-ended question, you do not know where it will take them. And what I was struck by is the focus of two things at once. One, the inability to afford life today in this city, and the sense that which was so difficult to purchase today, be it groceries, be it child.
The thing with Trump, he is very vibe politics, and some people would use that as an insult, and I can understand the argument, but really what Trump did well was selling the dream that we're going to make America better, that we're going to make things more affordable, the average person is going to make more money, we're going to be America first and only focus on ourselves and not care so much about the rest of the world. Now, that whole thing was a lie. It's unfortunate. The only good thing that's come from Trump is, well, the border's been shut down. They're not deporting a whole lot of illegals, but I don't really care about that too much as long as the streets are safe. But yeah, he closed the border. Infinite illegal immigration is not a good thing. And, you know, he's changed the culture. I honestly think those are the two things that Trump's done well. But the problem is, whoever the next guy is, if it's a Democrat, is going to swing the culture the opposite way, and they're probably going to let in as many illegals as possible. So it's, in the long run, Trump's legacy will probably lead to nothing.
Care, be it public transit, be it rent, was far more within reach 4 years ago. And so a message of a cost of living crisis, a message of cheaper groceries, a message of a more affordable life very much spoke to the crisis that people were living through. And amidst this, a diminishing faith in the ideal of democracy, the value of democracy, in part because of its inability to deliver on these material concerns, but also because amidst being told that there wasn't enough money for so much of this kind of an agenda, here there were billions of dollars being sent for wars abroad. It really stayed with me in that for many of these New Yorkers, and I would argue for many Americans across the country, it's not necessarily a question of making a
That's pretty much what I was saying, though.
Decision by virtue of the ideological commitments of the candidate in front of you, or what organization they, consider their political home, or their journey at large. It's a question of, do you see yourself in their agenda?
Well, you have in a sense, are the first major politician to get the vote of and recognize a huge proportion of our city's population, which is people who are Muslim and or Asian, from South Asian countries as immigrants or children of immigrants. That was a kind of unrecognized thing. We've never had a mayor from that background. And at the same time, you've had your troubles with the black vote. You've been in black churches. You've taken on more advisors to help you with this. But what accounts for your difficulty with black voters in the city? And will that change?
No, I don't really see it as a difficulty. I started this race polling at 1%, and that's being charitable and perhaps rounding up. And in fact, at that point, to be included in a poll was in itself a success. I remember many of my early conversations in speaking to pastors, trying to get in front of a congregation. And it took quite a few months. And our first church that I spoke in front of was...
Because they told you they were with that.
Eventually, somebody has to rise up, though. That is actually America first. And I'm getting behind whoever that person actually ends up being. It wasn't Trump, but somebody's going to show up. It's not this guy. This guy's so phony, the fake smiles, the way he's trying to speak and sound sincere. It's so fucking fake, and this is why we hate politicians.
We're with Eric Adams or we're with Cuomo?
Some of it was that. Some of it was, who are you?
Right.
You know, and
A reasonable question.
A reasonable question for a state assembly member from Western Queens for whom most New Yorkers have no idea. And, the first church that I got into, the church in Crown Heights, was because I had been following up with that pastor, Reverend Rashad Raymond Moore. I had called, I had texted, and then he happened to come to speak in Albany at the governor's state of the state. And I ran down the stairs at the end of that ceremony, and I said, Reverend, how are you? Please, I'd love to. And we set up a meeting, and then I went and I spoke at the church. And then from that moment on, this is maybe about February, I would average probably about a church a weekend, and then by the end of it, 2 churches every Sunday. And at this point, it's multiple churches on a Sunday and also Seventh-day Adventist church on a Saturday. And I remember sitting with another pastor in Queens who had endorsed Cuomo in the primary. This is in the spring. And I asked, why did you endorse Cuomo? And he said, I endorsed Mario's son. And I endorsed him because Mario was good to us. And part of the reason I don't begrudge the journey that I've been on, the initial response that many have had, is because I'm not just running against Andrew Cuomo. I'm also running against the legacy of his name and his last name specifically, and what that means to
But you have to be of a certain generation to have any in with Mario Cuomo.
Yeah, and I think that also tells the story that has often been told as if it's a story of race, when I think it's actually more a story of generation. Part of the reason we won the primary is because we won young black voters, and that was part of us winning young voters across the city. And now the work is to earn every single vote beyond that. This focus on affordability is a focus that seeks to build on the work of so many incredible black leaders in this country, but also in the city. And just this past Sunday, I spoke at a church where Dr. King had actually recuperated in the parsonage of after he was stabbed in 1958. And I stood on that in that same church and spoke of his quote that he said decades ago, which is, what good is having the right to sit at a lunch counter if you can't afford to buy a hamburger?
But I'm going to ask you a question, inevitably, about socialism. And whenever you're asked this question, you quote...
Get your bread up, little nigga.
Dr. King.
Yes, I do.
Yes, you do.
Get your fucking bread up. It's that simple.
It's 1961, call it democracy or call it democratic socialism, but there must be a better distribution of wealth within this country for all of God's children. Fine. However, sir, socialism means something. To be a social democrat is different from being a democratic socialist. It's not an academic thing. You know this as well as I do. To be a democratic socialist means you're for democratic means of achieving socialism, but socialism, by any definition, means at least to some degree the state ownership of enterprises, to some degree. And that can vary depending on if you're Edward Bernstein or Karl Marx or whoever you happen.
Yeah, and that's where I'm really against it. I mean, I think it comes down to... I just think give people a universal basic income, especially poor people below, really people below like 100K a year should get a universal basic income, I think. I think that would help people, and you just take some of the tax money to do that. We're spending all this money everywhere other than here. We might as well give our people some money. I don't see anything wrong with that, but for businesses to be partially run by the government is a terrible idea.
Why do you gravitate?
It doesn't work. It's inefficient. The government's bad at doing pretty much everything, especially when it comes to running a business. They're terrible at that. All they do is spend money. So it doesn't lead to anything good in terms of that, in my opinion.
Toward socialism.
My journey into calling myself a democratic socialist begins with Bernie's run in 2016. And his campaign was a formative one for me and for many across this country, both in giving us that language, but also in explaining the core tenet of it, which to me continues to be a belief in dignity as the cornerstone of politics, and that I think that every New Yorker should have whatever they need to live a dignified life. And what I mean by a dignified life is that which they need is not then something that they can be priced out of. And so the focus of our campaign has been on housing, it's been on childcare, it's been on public transit. And in some senses...
So, forgive me for interrupting. So what you're saying is anything that's a necessity, housing, food, education, should not ever be given over to market instability or prices. It has to be there.
I
It has to be free.
I think that it has to be a fixture in each and every person's life, right? My landmark policy on housing in this race is about freezing the rent for rent-stabilized tenants. We live in
Which has been done previously by non-socialist
yes,
mayors.
it has. We have a city of 8.5 million people. About 2.5 million live in rent-stabilized housing. The city determines the rate of the rent increase or lack thereof of that housing through the Rent Guidelines Board, at which the mayor appoints all 9 members. And if I believe that housing is a human right, then it is incumbent upon me to use every tool I can to ensure that it is as affordable as possible. And here we have an example of where the city has a direct means by which to ensure that affordability.
How is it, being a democratic socialist in your view, different from being a social democrat or a particularly liberal member of the Democratic Party?
There are many people who will say housing is a human right, and yet it oftentimes seems as if it is relegated simply to the use of it as a slogan, as opposed to it being something.
So by your
that's a
definition, say
framework.
you'll fight harder for it than others.
I think that you mean what you say. What separates it from other styles of ideology or politics or theory, to me in practice, has been a separation also of whether you are willing to reckon with the broken nature of the system we have around us, and taking on the entrenched interests necessary to deliver these kinds of ideals in practice.
You say you reminded us. Fair enough. I think in
I was working very hard
I think
to
in
respond to you.
2012 you also did some work for Obama in Pennsylvania. Am I right?
Yes. I went. I think it was not 2012. I think it was actually for the first election.
2008.
I think so. But I door knocked for President Obama. Yes.
And yet, if I read your generation correctly, there's a distinct disappointment, particularly with Obama. I wonder how you look back at the Obama experience. I know he called you the morning after you won. Tell me about that conversation, and tell me about your sense of Obama vis-a-vis Bernie. Because it seems to me that you admire Bernie Sanders' politics a great deal more than Obama's in retrospect.
The call the morning after was quite a privilege to receive. And what I appreciated about it so much was that the focus of it was both on the question of hope and the importance of hope in our politics, and what the transition to governance looks like. There comes a responsibility with inspiring others and with creating hope, is that you must deliver on that. I think in your counterposing of Bernie and of Obama, I also think of it as different points in my own life. Obama, 2008, I'm sorry to say this, I'm in high school.
You're killing me.
I know, I just wanted to
Absolutely.
say sorry
killing
before
me.
I stabbed you.
Yeah,
At
thanks
least
a
I
lot.
did it from the front.
Yeah, we'll all die someday.
Better to know that it's coming.
You were in high school in 2008?
I was in high school in 2008.
I'm going to let that slide.
Andrew Cuomo's probably going to have a press conference about it tomorrow. But it's true, I was.
Yeah. I don't know if you just gained some votes or lost a few.
It's always a little bit dicey. The good thing about my youth is that I grow older every day.
Yeah, join the club.
But these years are the end of high school, the beginning of college, and then through the end of college. And Bernie is a few years after college. And I think I had this very interesting experience after college where I found out that organizing was a job. I didn't know you could get paid to organize. And I remember when I was looking for jobs in my second semester of my senior year, the Public Interest Research Group was creating something called Change Corps. So I went to Boston for the training, and we had an incredible cohort of organizers, and we really put through our paces and did a number of kind of capsules and seminars. And then I was posted for my first posting in Seattle, and I ran MoveOn.org's remote phone banking office. So I took these volunteers that existed online, brought them into a physical space. We made close to 400,000 phone calls for that midterm election. So I go from MoveOn.org to the Texas Public Interest Research Group, talk about the Affordable Care Act, and then come back to Denver. And over the course of this time, I am also getting to know my cohort, and we're making maybe about $750 every 2 weeks. And the way in which we're told to make it work is we find somebody that we can just crash on their couch in whatever city that we're in. And so we start to organize internally and start to put together an aspiration of a union within the organization. And they don't take too well to it. And when we come back to Denver for the mid-year retreat, the organizing starts to build, and one member of the cohort is fired, who's seen as being particularly disruptive, perhaps particularly a leader of this organizing effort. And I was one of those who was very, very much invested, and I saw the writing on the wall. I give this to you as an example of what also the experience was with liberal politics and testing out the meaning of some of these things.
A morality tale to say liberalism let you down?
No, it's more to say that.
I'll be honest, I know you were critical of Obama for, because of drones, for example, which was a very common critique. I mean, the most radical thing about Obama was identity. First black president. But he was not a radical. He is not a radical. You describe yourself as a radical. You do, continually.
No, when have I described myself as radical?
I will send you, as they say, we'll send you. There is a space between you. Describe that space.
I think that the point of my sharing that story is also the limits that I found within a certain kind of politics, and a desire for a politics that spoke to the broken nature of a status quo that wasn't specific to Republican politics, but also a far larger status quo that also included the Democratic Party. What was so exciting also about the Obama presidency was also the possibility of more people seeing themselves in our democracy. And that is a through line, even in my campaign. And ours is also a campaign that is built around a very specific set of politics that also looks to the ways in which our own politicians here in New York City have failed us, and our own politics has failed us. and that failure hasn't necessarily just been one of not enough New Yorkers being able to see themselves in it, but also the choices that have been made of what to focus on and what to ignore
In terms of policy.
in terms of policy, in terms of
I don't know, man. I just don't think this works in practice, frankly, because I think, like, the idea of socialism and really communism, that's what this is. I think this is actually different than socialism. My understanding of socialism is you have social programs to help the poor, not necessarily that you that you control businesses and artificially change prices of things. I think socialism makes sense. Maybe we need some healthcare reform. I don't know, though, because Canada's form of healthcare doesn't even work very well either. So I don't really know how you fix these things. I think giving a universal basic income is fair, but a city like New York City is expensive because it's a great city. A lot of people do want to live there, and you have to make money to live there. You could go live somewhere in the Midwest and live for a lot less. So I don't know why people feel entitled to having to live in New York in the first place. You just gotta hustle harder, bro.
people. When I went to speak to those voters on Fordham Road and on Hillside Avenue, there's a tendency to treat all of these issues that we're facing as if they were created by Donald Trump, when in fact the most salient of them are the ones that existed prior to him, that he has diagnosed and then exploited.
Let's talk about one of those issues that it's a great concern, and I hear it less. I hear a lot of discussion, reasonably, about housing prices, food, and any number of things, transportation. Education, a little less so. You have come from parents from the left, distinctly. In fact, your mother was profiled in the New Yorker years and years ago. Your father's book was just reviewed in the New Yorker by Califasana. And yet they sent you to a pretty expensive private school, Bank Street. You went to a high school that was public school, but it's for gifted kids who do well on a test. And then you went to Bowdoin, which is an expensive private college. How do you feel about that educational legacy of your own? And would you do the same for your kids? And how do you want to see this change?
The key is to ensure, and I would say this is true with education, but also with all public goods.
Right.
Listen, the unfortunate reality of life is that some people are just born to fail. Some people are dumber than others. Some are short. Some are tall. Some people have intrinsic advantages that you're never gonna fucking have. They grew up in a rich family. They're smarter than you. They're harder working than you. They're gonna go after what's theirs. They have, like, some people genuinely have every single advantage you could possibly have, while you have nothing, or maybe you have one or two. You should use those, but there is a reason why the rich is rich, and it's not necessarily just because they were born into it. Most weren't.
That they are at such a level of excellence that all will choose to use them, not just those who cannot afford that which is being provided by the private sector. And my vision for this city is one where those options that New Yorkers will choose to go to, the best ones, are within our public school system. And Bronx Science was
That's not how it works. Best is based on performance. You can't just invite everybody to go to the best fucking school because some people are stupid.
illustration of a glimpse of that, of the promise that education can hold for many. You know, I moved to New York City when I'm 7 years old, and I go to Bank Street, which is this very progressive middle school on the Upper West Side, just a few blocks from where I live.
Progressive in its politics, but private and expensive.
Yes, in its pedagogy.
Yeah.
I mean, in terms of its outlook. And I'm both a student at Bank Street, and then there's this one period where my father goes back to Uganda to write a book on Makerere called Scholars in the Marketplace. And I go back with my father for about,
Trying to act like they're nice people. That's what this interview is really giving me, bro. Those fucking eyes, the way he squints them and everything, dude. That's a shark trying to pretend to be one of us. He's not one of us.
I did learn that if you don't underline every sentence in your homework and then get it signed by your parent, that you will have your ear rubbed together in the manner of when you're going down a rope and your hands are...
That sounds painful. Yeah.
You know, it wasn't
a
something
good
I experienced on
reminder.
112th and Broadway.
Yeah.
But I think this is part of my own childhood, has been understanding that to be able to grow up without having to question whether that which I need would be that which I had is something that every child should have. And
Ideally, of course.
Yes.
Of course.
And I think-
But would you send your kid to Bank Street?
I would send my kid to a public school. And I think part of this is that...
Why?
Even if you had the means and it was markedly, the quality of it was
Why
less.
would you
well,
do
see,
that?
I don't think that that's the hypothetical that...
We're not asking hypothetically.
Yes, but by the time that I have a kid, I'll have been the mayor of the city.
And the schools will be that transformed, ideally.
You know, if you don't have an ambition to actually change the city around you, then I don't think you have a business in running. We allow the exceptions of systems to tell us the story of the system as a whole. And I think the importance here is that how can we make our public education such that even if you have the means, it's still where you choose to go? And there is an immense amount of work to be done in doing so. And yet I also think that it is critical to the success of governance as a whole, because schools are where many New Yorkers will engage with government the most. I think part of
Schools are the whole ball of wax in a way. But what confuses me when I'm thinking about these things, we have 150,000 kids in charter schools. They're public, but they're not. They're quite different from ordinary public schools, district schools. 90% of those kids are Black and Latino, and they want to be there. And yet people are very anxious about charter schools. I think you are. You don't want to see any new ones. Why? Why? What is? It's a real dilemma.
I've shared my skepticism on charter schools, and what I've said is a skepticism that is in part born out of the ways in which certain students are pushed out of those schools, disproportionate rates of suspension for certain sets of students, and the manner in which, when I was at the heart of a fight in Albany to finally fund our public schools that had been required by law in the campaign for fiscal equity, so much of the funding that we actually won, the vast majority of it, went to charter schools specifically. And these are skepticism. These are questions that I've raised publicly and I've shared.
Dude, it's just one of those things. You want the brightest kids to have the most resource so that they can become even smarter. You can't just dump resources into the dumb kids and expect them to do better. That's not how it works. Because they're just dumb. They're never going to be exceptional. I think really we just need to be honest about where people are, and not everybody needs to live a fancy life. And listen, I'm not saying this from a fucking high horse. I'm not the smartest motherfucker. I'm not somebody who needs a whole lot. I just need a roof over my head, food to eat, some nice scenery around me, the ability to walk and work out. That's all I really need in my life, honestly. And that's most of us. You don't need much.
They also don't preclude me
because we're not exceptional
from meeting with New Yorkers who feel very differently. And I was at St. Paul's Church in East New York. I was speaking with Reverend Brawley, who had told me that the church had helped to found a charter school called Imagine Me, and would I visit? And that's a visit that I'm planning on doing, because I think it's important to both be honest and also to still be open to meet with New Yorkers who feel very differently. And that is both the way in which I'll approach this subject, but frankly, subjects across the board in leading the city.
Is it a funding question? We now spend in the city $42,000 per pupil in schools. That's a lot. It's a hell of a lot. And yet, wealthy parents are still plucking their kids out and sending them to private schools. Not, middle class people and working class people, if they can get their kid into a charter school, very often they'll do that. What's the level of spending? What's the level of government reform on the part of your office? And you want to devolve power away from your office, which I'd like to know more about, that is going to make schools better the way you want them to be.
I don't think it's as simple as just a question of funding. I don't think it's that if we were to reach a certain point, then everything would be solved. I think there's also a real question of governance, of focus, of even internal reform. What I mean by that is that the Department of Education is the agency that city government spends the most on, of any agency.
By a lot.
We spend about $10 billion within that department on contracts. Now, some of those contracts are ones that are individualized per school district. There is an immense amount of money that I think could be saved were we to standardize a lot of this. Some of these contracts are also ones where we are procuring curricula that is then to be taught by teachers, only to then find out later at the end of the process that the curricula that the city has already procured is not actually teachable within the context that it's being procured for. And my point here is there has also been a strange history where we have hollowed out public capacity, replaced it with the outsourcing of much of these contracts in the name of saving money, and yet what we find is an ever-ballooning amount of money that's being spent on them. We're talking about a city that's still paying McKinsey millions of dollars to design a trash can. A city where, for the first phase of construction for the Second Avenue subway, we spent more money on consultants than construction. So I cite these examples to say that, to me, it's not that I want to get the 42,000 per student to 45 and then things will be better. It's that I want to make sure that every dollar is actually going into the benefit of the classroom, because I don't think that's the case when you're spending so many dollars out of the classroom. And so much of this is either...
Yeah, but a lot of that comes down to these parasitical bureaucrats that aren't going to go down without a fight. These people drain as much money from the schools as possible. They take and they take and they take, and that's a real problem. But you got to talk about that. You're going to have to wage war against these people if you actually want to change this.
It's a question of inefficiency. It's also, there's a real issue of patronage within our politics. And in some ways, it's a specific...
Is the teachers' union part of that system of patronage?
I would say that the first place to look is what this current mayoral administration has been doing. And the first place I want to go, frankly, is Tweed or Central, the place...
Explain that for a national
audience,
please.
Sorry.
That's all right. Tweed, yeah.
We're talking about kind of the upper management of the Department of Education. Right. We're talking about the kind of...
True, okay, based.
...apparatus that exists beyond teachers.
Actually based.
And students and the schools of the city. And the fact that there are many positions there where I couldn't quite explain to you what the job does. But I might be able to tell you.
Super based. Okay. All right, I can get behind this. I mean, this is based.
Who that person knows.
Smarter governance, more efficient governance. And I have to say...
And an interest in governance.
I've been a little bit surprised that you seems to have taken a deep interest lately in the Ezra Klein, Derek Thompson abundance agenda. I would not have thought that of you 6 months ago.
But I think that the most important thing is delivering. And if that is your framework,
Okay.
then
Was you a few years ago? Do you think have you kind of become? I look at the circle that was around you a year ago, mostly activists. That stands to reason. And now it's different. There are people from other campaigns in the Democratic Party. Patrick Gaspard. How's your relationship with Brad Lander now? Is he going to be your
it's a good
deputy?
relationship. He's a friend.
Will he play an important part in your being mayor?
I think that's what we're continuing to talk about personnel and those kinds of commitments. But I would push back a little bit on your characterization.
Okay, go ahead.
In that, I moved to the city when I'm 7 years old. I grew up as a young South Asian man in this city. I see one of the clearest illustrations of a betrayal of city government in the way in which it treats its taxi drivers. And
On the medallion issue.
the medallion issue. For a long time, these medallions were sold by the city to largely immigrants as a surefire ticket to the middle class. In the early 2000s, the value, even at that point, the way in which the price is outstripping the value, it's failure. And there are suicides after suicides of drivers taking their lives because of the weight of this crisis. And yet nothing is done. And when I run for state assembly, 2019, I'm one of the first candidates to send a mailer out to constituents across the district with a focus on the taxi crisis, saying that I'm going to end excessive medallion debt. When I get into office, one of the meetings I have is with Senator Schumer. And Senator Schumer, with whom we don't always agree on a number
Who's
of
yet to
different
endorse
issues.
you, and Hakeem Jeffries has yet to endorse you.
You got to sneak it in.
I
huh?
did.
Come on. And we sit down and we have a conversation. And one of the things that I ask Senator Schumer is to take a ride with me in a taxi with suicide because of the weight of this crisis. And he agrees. I think his father-in-law was a taxi driver, and it has an immense meaning to him. And we build a relationship specific to this issue of the medallion crisis. And I helped to build with the union, the New York Taxi Workers Alliance, on the outside. And as we're doing all this, organizing very much with Senator Schumer and his team, who are leading the fight on the inside, these two things happening in tandem. And the final part of this is going on a 15-day hunger strike and doing all of it while being in close coordination with the push and pull on the inside and building an ever-expanding political coalition to come to the site of the hunger strike, to call the mayoral administration, to push. And eventually, we win $450 million in debt relief. We win a city-backed
Huge
guarantee.
victory.
And I tell you this story
Damn, dude.
because
All right,
the light
this is-
pushback.
Fair enough.
That the story of the things I'm most proud of are also the ones that include working with those far beyond just those who would identify their politics exactly the same as mine.
You've evolved. People evolve. They change. And it's not just because you're running for political office and there are hot buttons in the city. For example, your first political experience in an organizational sense was in college at Bowdoin, and you co-founded Students for Justice in Palestine. And there was a lot of talk then about, and you wrote your thesis on Frantz Fanon.
And Jean-Jacques Rousseau.
And, well, fair enough.
He always gets forgotten.
Fair enough. But now you're at a point where you've also denounced Hamas as well as shown enormous support for the Palestinian cause and described what's happened in the last 2 years as a genocide. In other words,
Well, listen, let's be real about what war is. War is something where radicals fight the opposing ideology to try to win, where the innocents end up losing their lives at mass rates. It is a genocide, but also genocides happen all the time.
your rhetoric and
My main thing with the whole Israel-Palestine conflict is we shouldn't be fucking paying for it. It makes us look terrible, and we should cut off Israel. Fuck Israel.
your language has shifted. And is that only because you're running for mayor or because people change?
This is the other part of youth, is growth. And it stems also from reckoning with the complexities of so many things. I think one thing that has often been brought up as an example of this is the question of my views on policing.
And defund the police and so on.
And tweets that I sent in 2020 calling for defund and with critiques of the police department. And, I grew up in this city thinking often about safety and justice.
We need to fund the police. Throw all the criminals, all the violent criminals need to go to prison forever. He's wrong about this. Fuck this guy.
And
So wrong.
time and time again,
More criminals need to be held accountable and never let out. Violent criminals specifically. Rapists, murderers, all of them, we need to lock them away and throw away the key.
reckoning with the absence of that justice, whether it be learning about the Central Park Five or Sean Bell or Eric Garner or reading about Michael Brown, or then to 2020, the murder of George Floyd, and feeling like the
Motherfucker was not a good citizen, alright? He was overdosing on fentanyl. He suffocated from the fentanyl.
distance between these notions had never felt wider in my life in this city. And reckoning with that distance. And in the time since then, also understanding that in order to deliver that justice, it still has to be intertwined with that safety. And that when you do so, you do it with a recognition.
How do you make this country safer? Throw away all the violent criminals. They're mostly killing each other, so who really cares? But At the end of the day, all these petty criminals need to be locked away forever. And honestly, just murderers in general. You don't want that happening in our streets. I don't care if it's black people killing black people. They still need to be thrown in prison forever.
That
and eventually there'll be none left. And then the streets will just be safe.
Looking to lead, whether it be at an assembly level or it also be at a citywide level, police officers who are putting their lives on the line every day, Muslim New Yorkers in my district who had been illegally surveilled on the basis of their faith, black and brown New Yorkers who were victims of police brutality. You lead all of them together. And you do so by understanding what it will take to deliver both of those things in tandem and the critical nature of the relationships around all of that.
You can't, because at the end of the day, you have people celebrating when a black kid stabs a white kid. These are all group issues, and you're never going to resolve them. That's the problem. So you just have to throw away the criminals. That's it.
Gets you to that point.
You have high aspirations for the city. You've been you have extraordinary political skills, and you've reached loads and loads of people who were either indifferent to politics or so bummed out by politics, particularly the Trump period, and that you've brought them in. And you've said, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, and these are not minor things. De Blasio was able to do one big thing as mayor. One big thing.
He did freeze the rent 3 times.
Okay, that's a little easier, but how are you going to pay for it is the big issue with you. And in other words, where's it coming from? You can't just say, I'm going to move the checkers a little bit on the checkerboard of expenditures. That's not going to work. You're talking about multi-billions of dollars in which lots of costs are baked in.
So I think first,
the aspirational aspect of you is going to outweigh the practical outcome, and you're setting up the city for disappointment. That's the case.
Sometimes people treat aspiration as if it is a crime. That to dream of the city we deserve is as if to engage in a politics that has no place. My job is to earn every vote that I can over these next 4 weeks. And there are also some New Yorkers whose votes I will only earn after being the mayor, through them seeing what I'm doing as the mayor. And that is fine, because I want to continue to expand this coalition. The agenda that we've run on since October 23rd when we launched the campaign, there are 3 major points. Freeze the rent for 2.5 million rent-stabilized tenants, make buses fast and free, deliver universal childcare. The reason I was lightly pushing when you said de Blasio only did one big thing was that de Blasio froze the rent 3 times. And that is a key part of our agenda. The other 2 points are the ones that require significant fiscal investment. Making buses fast and free, making them free is about $700 million or so a year. Universal childcare is about
How much do we lose in fares?
Right now, buses collect around 45 to 50%.
And how many people are paying for it as it is now?
That's what I mean. About 45 to 50% of people on the bus are paying for it. And when the MTA did a blue ribbon study as to the nature of fare evasion, what they found is the highest rates of fare evasion are in the neighborhoods with the highest levels of poverty. But to go to your point, let's say it's about 700 million on buses, 5 or 6 billion in universal childcare. These are real costs, real significant amounts of money. I would argue a few things. The first, these are the kinds of expenditures that do happen in city and state politics. Right? I'm running against a man who found $959 million for Elon Musk in tax credits 1 year in Albany. That's more money than it takes to make the bus free.
True.
We're talking about a municipal budget of 116
That's
billion,
true.
state budget of more than 252
Fair.
billion. These are not things you snap your fingers and then they're real and here they are.
And
in
you're
front of you.
dependent on Albany.
Yes, you have to work with Albany. And that's why
Do
actually...
you have the support of Kathy Hochul, the governor?
See, I do. And
I know you have her support.
Yes.
Do you have her support on the specifics of your agenda?
When we spoke,
You're relying
the
on
thing
her.
that made me most excited was that we were speaking often about the affordability agenda. So her endorsement, Carl Hastie, who's the Speaker of the Assembly, State Senate Majority Leader Andre Stewart Cousins, those are the 3 people described as the 3 people in the room. They've all endorsed the campaign, and more importantly, the agenda behind the campaign of affordability.
The President of the United States has offered to support you. Russell Vought, Trump's budget chief, recently canceled an $8 billion infrastructure project here. 18, forgive me.
That's the problem with Trump. Nothing is serious anymore. It's funny, but also we should probably take our country more seriously, don't you think?
And that's, I think, just for practice, that you can expect, as mayor, a really full assault from Washington. What can you do about that?
I think that will be an inevitability. We have to treat it as such, as opposed to something that's simply just possible. This is an administration that looks at the flourishing of city life, wherever it may be across this country, as a threat to their entire political agenda. And part of that is because it is an illustration of everything that they claim to be fighting against and the ways in which this city should and could be the model of an alternative to a Trump-style politics. But part of the issue is that for too long we've been the answer as to how we got Donald Trump as the president.
But how do you stand up to him? What are the mechanisms and means to do so?
I think there are clear mechanisms in the way in which you prepare the city, right? We talk about Trump-proofing the city. Some of them are ensuring that you actually provide the support and the focus to a law department of the city that has a storied history of being on the front lines of fighting for civil rights, but is at this point understaffed compared to even just a few years ago. Too often we treat Donald Trump's pronouncements as if they are law simply by virtue of the fact that they come from his mouth, when in fact what we are often discussing are the most obvious overreaches and illegalities that we've seen in modern politics. But part of the ways in which that you actually stop that is that you're willing to fight that. And I think we've seen in his first term and his second term that what Donald Trump most often respects is strength.
Fair.
It is not cowardice. It's not collaboration like we saw from Adams or coordination like we're seeing from Cuomo. It's someone who's willing to stand up and fight back. And the last point I'll just say is that we cannot allow this to become a contest between 2 individuals. Donald Trump suspending these kind of infrastructure grants, Donald Trump speaking about deploying the National Guard. It's not about Donald Trump versus myself. It's about Donald Trump versus the city. And that's why you need someone leading the city that can build a front of New Yorkers who have a wide variety of politics, but are united on the question of this city and the importance of it and the fact the federal government shouldn't be attacking the very existence of it.
We live in very dark times. Political violence is now something we talk about all the time. Do you fear it for yourself? Do you fear for your life?
It's unlikely.
I,
I think it'll be fine.
I'm fearful for those around me. And
I hear you, but do you fear for yourself as well?
I try not to think about it. I make sure that
Can you manage when people come up to you and say threatening things on the street?
You know, being a New Yorker means being at ease with much of what is thrown at you. The other day, I was doing a press conference about our affordability calculator, zohranfornyc.com/calculator.
That was the best pivot I've ever heard.
You know,
but
you
go
stuck in a
ahead.
few things. I got stuck in a few things. And there was a man who was biking around the press conference calling me a terrorist and telling me to go back to where I came from. And we continued on talking about rent stabilization. But what concerns me is a man from Texas who was just arraigned on charges here in Queens a few weeks ago for...
This is what I mean. I mean, Trump has done us a disservice in the sense that he's made this country ridiculous and he's really amped people to fuck up. His whole existence, or at least a big part of it, is calling Democrats all evil and talking about putting them in their place. That's really what it comes down to, a lot of it, which isn't great, you know.
making death threats to me, death threats to my family, death threats to my team. And I just think about the fact that so often the people who have to bear the brunt of these kinds of threats, it's not me. It's my district staff picking up the phone thinking it might be someone from Astoria who needs help staying in their apartment, instead being told that they want a bullet, an IDF bullet to go through their skull. This is the language that they hear.
Let's conclude by having a serious.
Yeah, that's nice.
Forgive me for calling it a lightning round of very short questions, very short
To work on your
answers.
segues.
I'm trying to do that. You now live in a one-bedroom apartment in
Yes.
Astoria, what our reporter calls a classic mini 3. Are you going to move to Gracie Mansion if you win?
I'm definitely moving out of my apartment. This morning was spending time with the super about the sink leaking.
I see. Sink leaking. Okay. Should
Most of our
AOC,
towels are on the floor. of the
should
kitchen
AOC
right now.
run for president?
It's been a pleasure and a privilege to be represented by Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez, and I think she's an inspiration not just to me, but to people across the country.
Should AOC run for president?
Habibi, you know
I've
what
been
I'm
doing
doing.
this
I know
a
what you're doing, right? I think the world of her. I'll leave the
Good
decisions to
Lord.
her.
My colleague Eric Latch says that you have a copy of Robert Caro's The Power Broker, which I think is distributed free
Yeah.
to everybody on your shelf in Astoria. Does the city need more Robert Moses or more Jane Jacobs? More building or more preservation?
The city needs someone who can find inspiration in both.
They said you were good. Top 3 New York restaurants. Who
Oh,
are your,
man.
your go-to?
My go-tos?
Mhm.
My go-tos. Kebab King, Jackson Heights. You got to go there for biryani. It's incredible. I would say then finish it off with some pan outside. Last night, my wife and I were currently in 30-minute increments watching the Mission Impossible series. And we just finished Mission
In
Impossible.
30-minute increments?
We don't have much time, so it's taken about 3 months to get
Jesus
through Mission Impossible 4.
Christ, dude.
We ordered from Pie Boat in Astoria. They have a great dish I'd recommend called Koi Noor. It's like very spicy raw beef. The third place that I would recommend, I would say the Lamb Adana Lafa at Ziyara.
Where's that?
That is on Steinway, and you get the mint lemonade, and then you have some hummus and some pita.
I don't know if you're helping these restaurants or you're going to kill
You know-
by your advertising. Now, you said you're going to move into a new apartment, but,
I mean, yeah.
but you're not committing to Gracie Mansion.
Yeah, I'm not measuring the grapes.
Gracie Mansion looks a little, it's kind of not on brand, is it?
I don't think too much of brand, to be
Okay.
honest.
Would you give up your unstabilized place in Astoria?
Nothing
Or
like-
like Ed
yeah.
Koch, would you hang on to the bitter end?
My wife and I have just talked about the fact that a one-bedroom is a little too small for us now.
Do you have any announcements in that direction?
No,
I see,
no
okay.
announcements.
Because she'd kill you if you did.
Just a dream of being able to live in a larger
enough.
apartment.
Yeah, okay, interview. Agree with some things, disagree with others. But yeah, this is going to be the next mayor of New York City, so wild times. I don't know what to make the politics now. I mean, he seems pretty reasonable, but I haven't really seen much on this guy. Largely, I don't know if what he's saying is going to work. It probably won't. And all the rich people are leaving New York City, so there's not going to be enough money in New York anymore. So I don't know, dude. But yeah, smash the thumbs up if you watch this to the end and subscribe.